On Kunwu Mountain, nothing was ever as it seemed. Illusions masked truth, treasures concealed calamity, and the closer one drew to the summit, the thinner the veil between fortune and death became. When the heavens trembled and the sealed entrance exploded in a storm of blinding light, even nascent soul cultivators felt a chill creep into their hearts. For in this ancient ruin, where forgotten formations still breathed and devilish wills lingered in silence every step, forward was a wager against fate itself. And fate tonight had begun to stir. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. Han Li slowly rose to his feet, his robes whispering softly against the stone. He extended a hand toward a drifting crimson cloud nearby. At once an enormous azure hand condensed out of thin air, its fingers forming from swirling light before it seized the cloud in an unyielding grasp. His gaze lingered on the luminous hand. Then, with a subtle shift of his fingers, he formed a series of obscure seals and murmured an incantation beneath his breath. The giant hand trembled as though stirred by some unseen current before curling into a tight fist around the cloud. Brilliant azure radiance burst forth between its fingers. In a matter of breaths, the cloud was compressed, reshaped, refined into a sphere of pure light. Han Li opened his mouth and expelled a thread of blue nascent flame. The strand coiled around the sphere like a living serpent before he cast it into a roaring inferno. Only then did he withdraw his hands and cease his spellcasting. His face was devoid of emotion as he watched the blazing sphere in utter silence. Time passed, how long even he did not know. At last the corner of his mouth twitched. With a flick of his sleeve, he swept the flames aside. The blaze scattered like retreating spirits, revealing a faint red pearl suspended in mid-air. "So I was right," he murmured softly. Such exquisite methods of concealment transformation, so flawless, could only have been devised by ancient cultivators. Even in their era, only a rare few would have possessed such mastery. He exhaled faintly, a trace of gloom crossing his eyes. It is fortunate that Xin Ruyan once mentioned a similar restriction in the jade slip she entrusted to me. Otherwise, I would have been utterly confounded. It seems I must continue tempering my spirit eyes. If I persist in refining them with bright sight spirit water for another century, I should be able to pierce even the most consummate illusionary transformations. He felt a faint dissatisfaction at his earlier failure to see through the deception at a glance. Xin Ruyan, once merely a qi condensation cultivator, had been a genius of spell formations. In exchange for avenging her deceased husband, she had given Han Li the culmination of her life's knowledge. That legacy had once again proven invaluable. Han Li withdrew his gaze from the red pearl and surveyed his surroundings. Soon a drifting blue cloud caught his attention. Without hesitation, he reached out once more, enveloping it in nascent flames. This time the cloud vanished in the blink of an eye. He showed no surprise. Calmly he reached for another. After 2 further failures, he finally obtained a blue pearl. Half a day later, he had gathered 4 more yellow, azure, and gold pearls, hovering before him in quiet splendor. With solemn composure, he raised a hand. The pearls shot skyward at his command. He drew his hands inward. The pearls began to revolve slowly at first, then faster and faster, until they merged into a radiant ring of prismatic light. A faint light flickered in Han Li's eyes. "Go," he uttered softly. His fingers stilled. The rainbow ring shattered apart, streaking off in divergent directions along profound and mysterious trajectories. In an instant, the pearls reached seemingly unrelated positions and began to revolve in place. They pulsed, rhythmically swelling and contracting as they underwent a strange and wondrous transformation. Blinding radiance erupted. Han Li narrowed his eyes as the 5 pearls blazed like miniature suns. Then they converged. The world around him blurred. Space twisted. Light surged like a rising tide. And in the next moment, he stood once more upon the stone steps beside the massive boulder. Fellow Taoist Han, Brother Han, Bai Yaoi and Old Man Fu cried out simultaneously. They stood some 10 meters away. Alarm etched across their faces, relief swiftly replacing their distress when they saw him unharmed. "So you two were trapped as well?" Hanli asked evenly. "It must have been Brother Han who broke that bizarre restriction," Old Man Fu said, lingering fear still clinging to his voice. "I have never encountered such a terrifying spell formation. I thought I would remain imprisoned within until my death." His aura was noticeably weakened. Both his magic power and spiritual vitality had clearly suffered in his futile attempts to escape. Bai Yaoyi gave a wry smile, gratitude shimmering faintly in her eyes. "My circumstances were no better. Many thanks to Brother Han for shattering the restriction." Hanli waved a hand lightly. "It was nothing. I had once heard of similar ancient restrictions by chance and was able to dispel it. Such formations are exceedingly rare. If I am not mistaken, the spiritual herb Brother Fu seized was in fact a transformed magic tool. I fear you were deceived." "That cannot be. It was clearly a yi. What is this?" Old Man Fu hastily retrieved a jade box. Upon opening it, he found not a spiritual herb, but an ordinary jade scepter resting inside. He stood frozen in disbelief. In truth, Han Li continued calmly. "We had already fallen within the illusion's grasp upon approaching that enormous stone. By grabbing the spiritual herb, fellow Taoist merely triggered its most formidable restriction. Why not look again?" He pointed toward the boulder. The other two turned, and indeed a plant bearing clusters of purple berries now grew plainly upon it. "Those ancient cultivators were truly insidious to lay such a trap," Old Man Fu said, in flustered frustration. "What were they thinking?" Bai Yaoyi curled her lips in silent astonishment. "There is no need for such amazement," Han Li said indifferently. "This ancient restriction required activation by those who entered it. Its appearance shifting was only natural. However, it has merely been dispersed, not destroyed. We have but a limited window. This place hardly resembles an immortal spirit mountain," Old Man Fu muttered bitterly. "It is more akin to a dragon's lair." Han Li's eyes flickered. "Let us proceed with greater caution. This is no simple ruin. I dispelled that restriction by fortune alone. I cannot guarantee the same outcome next time. It would be wise not to provoke calamity." Old Man Fu gave an embarrassed laugh. "I shall not act rashly again." Bai Yaoyi nodded thoughtfully. "Since we are agreed," Han Li said, glancing toward the mountain peak, "let us continue. The commotion ahead has ceased. Over these past days, they may already have reached the summit." With that, he ascended the stone steps once more. The other two followed closely behind. Several hours later, the trio passed towering cliffs and arrived at the stone pavilion where the Ye clan had once rested, where Xianxia had vanished without a trace. Hanli sighed faintly. They halted at a distance, gazing toward the pavilion. Old Man Fu and Bai Yaoyi soon noticed it as well. Shallow footprints marked the loose earth nearby, so faint that an inattentive eye would easily overlook them. "Others have been here," Bai Yaoyi said, her brows knitting together. Old Man Fu pondered briefly, then pointed toward the pavilion's side. "Look at that stone!" A deep, narrow groove nearly 10 meters long marred its surface. It was unmistakably the remnant of an incomparably sharp sword Qi, left unintentionally by the Ye clan's seventh uncle during his battle with the Lion Hawk. Bai Yaoyi's eyes brightened. "This mark is recent. Something else must have attacked them. Could it have been the silver-winged night fiend?" Perhaps, Han Li replied calmly. "In any case, they have continued upward. That should spare us some trouble." Old Man Fu smiled, about to speak, but a sudden flash of white light burst forth nearby. A translucent, colorless barrier shimmered into existence. Within it, a bleached silhouette gradually emerged, its indistinct features fixed clearly upon the three of them. Han Li and Bai Yaoyi both felt a surge of relief at last, the long-sought exit. Yet Old Man Fu's face drained of blood. "The unbreakable Cinque Devils," he shouted hoarsely. "Those are old devil Qian's incarnations." Han Li was momentarily stunned. The name stirred something in his memory. Before he could fully recall it, he noticed that Bai Yaoyi's complexion had also turned pale. Several muffled bursts sounded in succession. 4 more white silhouettes materialized. 5 indistinct figures now stood abreast, their rigid statue-like gazes settling upon Han Li and his companions. The realization struck him like a blade of ice. The Grand Elder of the Yin sifting sect. His expression darkened instantly. So it is fellow Taoist Fu. What a coincidence. Old Devil Qian's voice rang out at first, tinged with surprise. No wonder I could not locate you. You had entered here ahead of me. His tone shifted, carrying a hint of amusement. And from this lady's unusual attire, she must be a cultivator of the North Night Palace. I am, after all, an old acquaintance of your palace's Madame Liu. Then his gaze fell upon Han Li. As for this final fellow Taoist, could it be Brother Han of the Heavenly South? My sect and the Endless Sky Temple have searched high and low for you. His voice trailed off, and then burst into wild echoing laughter that reverberated through the mountain air. When Bai Yaoyi and Old Man Fu heard Han Li's name mentioned alongside the Heavenly South, both turned to look at him in astonishment, bewilderment plain upon their faces. Han Li, however, paid them no heed. His gaze remained fixed upon the 5 white silhouettes before him, his eyes dark and unreadable as he stared in silence. He had personally slain a mid-nascent soul elder of the Yin sifting sect and seized that man's sect-defining, treasure the ghost-sifting banner. Words could no longer mend such enmity. Moreover, from the very beginning, he had intended to wrest from the Yin sifting sect the method to dispel the soul seal curse afflicting his Tao, companion a secret known only to the sect master and the Grand Elder. Originally, his plan had been to strike at the sect master, yet fate had brought the Grand Elder before him instead. A rare opportunity. The two stood at the apex of the Yin sifting sect. How often would either be found alone? This Grand Elder would undoubtedly prove a far more brutal adversary than the silver-winged Night Fiend. The Night Fiend had lacked compatible treasures and been shackled by restrictive seals, yet even so had nearly forced Han Li to the brink of death. At that time, however, Han Li had not revealed his full strength. He had refrained from deploying Monarch Soul Divergence's grand puppet. If he fought without restraint, there was a chance. And even if the unbreakable Kinke devils were as terrifying as legend claimed, his divine devil-bane lightning was born to restrain baleful and devilish arts. These thoughts flashed through his mind in the span of a heartbeat. At that moment, the central silhouette among the 5 raised a hand in an incantation seal. Grey light shimmered over its body, condensing and solidifying before it. In the blink of an eye, the vague form gave way to the image of a grey-robed cultivator. The transformation was eerie beyond words. A faint veil of grey qi obscured the man's features, but the pallor of his hair betrayed the weight of countless years. Old Devil Qian's true body had emerged. The air grew heavy. Han Li Bai Yaoyi and Old Man Fu all became vastly more vigilant, yet none could discern what thoughts lay behind that grey-shrouded gaze. Without uttering a word, the old devil slapped his storage pouch and retrieved a small pitch-black banner. With a casual flick of his wrist, he waved it toward them. Old Man Fu's face fell drastically. He hurriedly summoned a treasure into his grasp. Bai Yaoyi's body bloomed with icy radiance, forming a crystalline barrier around her form in an instant. Han Li merely raised an eyebrow and observed. As moments passed and nothing happened, a deeper gloom settled over his expression. How odd. Strange indeed, Old Devil Qian muttered. The banner flickered faintly with black light, yet displayed no further reaction. His tone carried unmistakable surprise. Brother Qian, Old Man Fu said cautiously, "Why take out the ghost-sifting banner? Could it be you intend to ignite a war between our sects?" Old Devil Qian's gaze swept across the trio. His voice was calm, but beneath it lurked a chilling undertone. "I have no interest in war. However, Brother Han and I have certain unsettled matters. As you two are uninvolved, I shall not hinder you should you choose to depart." "It seems we are of one mind," Han Li replied with an unhurried smile. "I have long heard of the formidable reputation of your unbreakable Cinque devils. I would very much like to test them personally." At those words, Bai Yaoyi and Old Man Fu exchanged uneasy glances. Old Devil Qian himself seemed mildly taken aback, his eyes narrowing as he reassessed Han Li. Old Man Fu frowned tensely. Brother Qian, though there may be grievances between your sect and fellow Taoist Han, this is hardly the proper place to settle them. Should we not first explore this mountain further? His words were not born purely of goodwill. Kunwu Mountain was fraught with peril, and Old Devil Qian was a pillar of their Devil Dao alliance. If he fell here, the consequences would ripple far and wide. Besides, Old Man Fu had no intention of abandoning Han Li. Outright, they were still bound by mutual interest. Of course, I shall explore this mountain, Old Devil, Qian replied coolly. But my sect has sought fellow Taoist Han for a very long time. This matter must be resolved first. It cannot wait. Does Brother Fu intend to involve himself? A frosty chuckle followed. Bai Yaoyi's bright eyes flickered. After a brief pause, she spoke resolutely. Outside this mountain, I have no stake in your dispute. But since we are already here, we intend to explore it. I fear I cannot comply with your suggestion. She had no desire to lose Han Li's formidable strength. Without him, this expedition would grow exponentially more dangerous. More importantly, she had witnessed his terrifying capabilities firsthand. If he did not fear Old Devil Qian, she would not retreat either. A cold glint surfaced in the grey-robed cultivator's eyes. When his gaze fell upon them, it felt as though the very air in their lungs threatened to freeze. Old Man Fu and Bai Yaoyi felt their hearts sink, but neither allowed it to show. Very well, Old Devil, Qian said at last. This matter may yet be set aside. However, a treasure of my sect has fallen into his hands. Return it, and I shall let him go. Refuse, and even at great cost, I will face the three of you. With that, he withdrew his icy gaze. Han Li laughed lightly. Oh, you mean the ghost-sifting banner? That is correct, Old Devil Qian said in a deep voice. When our sect's fourth elder perished in battle, the banner fell into your hands. Return it, and I shall spare you. For now, silence lingered. Han Li lifted his eyes briefly toward the heavens before letting out a faint sneer. Your tone is most imposing. I can return the ghost-sifting banner, but I have one condition. Would you care to hear it? You slew my sect's fourth elder and seized a legacy treasure, Old Devil Qian replied, fury curling into a thin smile. And you dare speak of conditions? Do you think I would not take your life? Behind him, the Cinque Devils leapt forward, drifting to his side like pale wraiths. The atmosphere thickened with killing intent. Old Man Fu's shock was unmistakable. As members of the Devil Dao Alliance, the Nine Serenities sect had known of the mysterious fall of the Yin Sifting sect's fourth elder, but that Han Li had slain him and claimed one of the ghost-sifting banners. No wonder Old Devil Qian would not relent even in this perilous place. Han Li's origins being concealed was hardly worth mentioning now. Han Li snorted softly, his expression turning cold. You speak as though it were simple to return. Your fourth elder pursued me relentlessly and even struck at my Dao companion. How could I allow such a treasure to return to your sect unchallenged? I care not what occurred in the heavenly south, Old Devil, Qian replied without hesitation. But the ghost-sifting banner must be reclaimed. Otherwise, my sect's prestige will suffer irreparable loss. So you refuse to hear my condition? Han Li's eyes narrowed to slits. Heh. Were you a grand elder of one of the 10 great sects, perhaps I would entertain you. But you are merely a trifling cultivator from the heavenly south. How dare you bargain with me? Old Devil Qian threw his head back in wild laughter. In the next instant, his body burst apart into a cloud of baleful grey qi, merging seamlessly with the 5 white silhouettes behind him. The Cinque Devils flared with grey radiance, their once vacant eyes ignited with bloodthirsty madness. Old Man Fu's expression changed drastically. Damn it, I nearly forgot this old devil cultivates the superior apathetic arts. It warps the temperament, making him rash and irascible. Our words have only provoked him further. Bai Yaoyi's brows knit together. Without another word, she raised her hand. A crystalline flying sword appeared circling above her head in a halo of icy brilliance. Han Li narrowed his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, the tri-flame fan slipped into his grasp. His other hand stealthily tapped his storage pouch as his spiritual sense locked onto the grand puppet within. He had already resolved himself. He would go all out. The moment the others struck, he would unleash the puppet and deliver old devil Qian a grievous wound. Even if he could not take the man's life-crippling, his cultivation would suffice. The next time they met, he could force the terms he desired. He had never once forgotten the soul seal curse tormenting Nangong Wan. So long as he obtained the method to dispel it, he could endure anything, even the endless pursuit of the yin-sifting sect. The Cinque devils suddenly released a shrill, uncanny cry. Their bodies grew nearly transparent, dissolving into smoke before streaking malevolently toward the trio. At that very instant, the luminous screen from which the white silhouettes had first emerged erupted with a thunderous explosion. Blinding radiance flooded the air. Before anyone could grasp what was unfolding, successive detonations rang out from within the light. Nearly a dozen streaks shot outward in a widening circle. Their brilliance dimmed, and each streak resolved into the figure of a person. Old Devil Qian abruptly withdrew his attack, grey chi swirling back into his sleeves as he turned with wary haste. His eyes narrowed. What just happened? Why such panic? The cultivators who had emerged from the screen of light were in wretched condition, robes torn, auras unstable, faces pale from exertion. Yet every one of them bore the unmistakable presence of nascent soul cultivation. However arrogant he might be, old Devil Qian did not dare treat them lightly. More troubling still was the faint premonition stirred by the explosion, an unease that lingered like a shadow across his heart. The newcomers were the 4 elders of the sacred poison sect, accompanied by 5 wandering cultivators, including the ever-suspicious Master Scatterwind. One among them stepped forward and said with forced composure, "Brother Qian's abilities are truly astonishing. You arrived a step ahead of us. Yi, is that fellow Taoist Fu of the 9 Serenities sect? And who might these other 2 be?" "So it is," Brother Hua, Old Man Fu, replied, though a trace of lingering anxiety still clung to his voice. "Your arrival is most timely. Might you enlighten us as to what caused that recent explosion?" A burly man among the vagrants gave a cold snort. "That is precisely what we should be asking. Since you arrived earlier, you must have been the ones to lay down the illusion formation outside. It detonated after we passed through and sealed the entrance behind us." At these words, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The newly arrived cultivators' expressions darkened. Their gazes turned unfriendly as they regarded Han Li's group. "You misunderstand," Old Man Fu said sharply, his face sinking. "When we arrived, others were already present. We had nothing whatsoever to do with the illusion formation you speak of. Or do you intend to vent your grievances upon us? In such a tangled situation, even the slightest display of weakness could invite disaster from every direction. There are others here." Even old Devil Qian showed surprise this time. Old Man Fu let out a cold snort. "We were transported here unintentionally by an ancient spell formation. At that time, we heard the sounds of others breaking through a restriction near the mountain summit. Unfortunately, we were trapped within a separate formation for several days and lost track of them. I suspect the illusion formation has something to do with that group. Is that so?" The large man and the others exchanged doubtful glances. Sacred Poison Sect's Grand Elder, Hua Tianqi, stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Brother Fu serves as enforcement elder of the 9 Serenities sect. If they truly breached the seal, then Sect Elder Gu would surely be personally presiding over matters." "That is a fair point," the burly man conceded after brief contemplation. Hua Tianqi's eyes drifted between the 2 camps. "But when we emerged, you 3 and Brother Qian appeared poised for battle. Have you offended one another?" Their readiness for combat was obvious. Old Man Fu hesitated for a fleeting moment, weighing his reply carefully. Far above, near the summit of Kunwu mountain, within a vast palace hall, the large-headed eccentric brandished a small golden hammer. Each swing unleashed a streak of silver-white lightning that shattered stone puppet after stone puppet into rubble. Behind him, the Ye clan elders manipulated their own magic treasures, beams of light crisscrossing the hall as they battered the oncoming tide. The puppets took the shapes of birds and four-legged beasts. Their bodies were astonishingly sturdy, and from their mouths they spewed crude but forceful spells. They surged endlessly from the surrounding corridors as though an invisible hand fed them without cease. Yet the Ye clan cultivators remained calm. Their expressions were steady, their movements precise, almost as though they were deliberately stalling. Then, a thunderous explosion boomed in the distance. One corridor collapsed in a cascade of stone and dust, cutting off a stream of incoming puppets. Smiles flickered across several elders' faces. Moments later, 3 more deafening blasts resounded. Additional corridors crumbled, sealing off the remaining puppet sources entirely. With renewed focus, the elders eradicated the last few constructs in the hall. One of them glanced at the shattered remains and mused, "What in the world are these mechanisms? They differ greatly from anything of the present age." Now that the assault had ceased, the group finally relaxed. They sat cross-legged, each holding spirit stones, as they quietly restored their depleted magic power. Though the battle had not seemed perilous, the sustained use of their treasures had drained them considerably. From the final collapsed corridor, a streak of white light shot forth and landed before them, resolving into the form of a white-robed Confucian scholar. He smiled faintly. "Elder Han, you were correct. Those corridors led to side chambers where the puppets were produced. I have destroyed the restrictions according to your instructions." "It was nothing," replied the disguised elder devil calmly. "I happened upon mention of this grand puppet formation in an ancient text. Had we merely endured, we would eventually have been worn down." The scholar chuckled. "It seems bringing you along was a wise decision. I fear we shall rely upon you again." "You flatter me," Grand Elder Devil answered with a faint, courteous smile. "I would have done my utmost regardless." The scholar nodded, clearly pleased. The large-headed eccentric suddenly let out a sharp laugh. "By now the formation we set outside should have detonated. With luck it may buy us some time." "Indeed," the scholar said solemnly, "given how long we have lingered here, others should already be rushing through. The formation's collapse should temporarily seal the entrance. In truth, the seal would have weakened in time, even without our interference. There remains a window before the seal fully fails," the eccentric added. "Long enough, I hope, for us to seize what we came for." He paused, then glanced around. "But where exactly are we? We cannot be far from the mountain's core structures." The scholar pondered briefly. "That is likely correct. We are encountering restrictions with increasing frequency. That alone suggests we approach a place of great importance." "That is reassuring," the eccentric muttered. Then his gaze shifted toward the entrance of the hall, unease flickering in his eyes. "However, there remains a troublesome matter. That silver-winged night fiend continues to shadow us. What does it intend? A sneak attack?" The others instinctively followed his gaze. They saw nothing, yet none doubted the truth. Somewhere beyond sight, the refined corpse lurked watching. If not for the presence of 2 late nascent soul cultivators among them, they would not have dared press forward. The scholar fell silent for a moment before speaking. "That refined corpse is troublesome indeed. Given sufficient time, we could wound or even hunt it down. But time is scarce. At present, it merely observes. If we move against it, we risk provoking it. Perhaps fate will see it ensnared by some restriction ahead." The others considered his words and nodded in agreement. The Night Fiend's movement techniques were extraordinary. Escape from it would be near impossible. After restoring a portion of their magic power, they rose and departed the hall. When the surroundings brightened once more, all of them stood stunned. Before them stretched more than a dozen stairways, each leading off in a different direction. Every path was cloaked in dense white fog, obscuring what lay beyond. A silent, oppressive mystery lingered in the air. One of the older cultivators sighed and turned to the scholar with a wry smile. "How are we to proceed? Even if we divide ourselves, we cannot possibly explore them all." The scholar raised a calming hand. "There is no need for alarm. This only confirms that we have reached the heart of Kunwu Mountain. Splitting up would be folly. We cannot protect ourselves alone. He pointed toward a distant platform of white jade where all the stairways converged. Though several kilometers away, its immense scale was unmistakable. Let us begin there. None objected. They rose into the air, and in the very next instant all of them were forced violently back to the ground. There is a restriction forbidding flight. The large-headed eccentric shouted in shock. Why would it be placed here? Fortunately, they had not ascended high and suffered no injuries. Instead, a strange excitement stirred among them. A flight-restricting barrier at such a location could only mean one thing. They had truly stepped into the most important heart of Kunwu Mountain.